South Korea has one of the highest inheritance tax rates in the world, 50% on estates above a certain threshold, according to the OECD. And yet, generation after generation, the same family names sit atop the same corporate empires. Samsung, Hyundai, Lotte, SK, each controlled not by a hired executive class, but by a bloodline. How does a family hold on to hundreds of billions of dollars of corporate power when the tax man is theoretically waiting at the door? The answer is not one simple loophole. It is an entire architecture, built quietly over decades, inside perfectly legal structures that most outsiders never think to question. Start with the scale. As of recent estimates, the Lee family of Samsung controls a group with assets valued at well over $300 billion, making it larger than the GDP of many mid-sized nations. According to data cited by the Korea Fair Trade Commission, South Korea's top 10 chaebol groups account for roughly 80% of the country's total stock market capitalization, per Korea Exchange data. When Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee died in 2020, his estate was estimated at around $26 billion. One of the largest inheritance events in modern corporate history, as reported by Bloomberg. His heirs faced a theoretical tax bill of roughly $12 billion, yet the family retained effective control of the Samsung empire. Meanwhile, Statistics Korea reports that the top 1% of Korean households hold more than 25% of all financial assets in the country. These are not abstract figures. They describe a system where economic gravity bends toward a very small number of families. The mechanism has three main pillars. The first is the circular ownership structure, what Koreans call the octopus leg model. Chaebol families rarely own the flagship company directly. Instead, they control a holding company or a small affiliate at the top of a chain, which owns shares in other affiliates, which owns shares in others still. A family might hold only 2 or 3% of the total group, but effectively govern the entire empire through this web of cross-shareholdings, as documented extensively by the Korea Fair Trade Commission. The second pillar is the convertible bond and new share issuance trick. Heirs are issued bonds or new shares in promising subsidiaries at artificially low valuations, sometimes before those subsidiaries grew dramatically in value. When the value multiplies, so does the heir's stake at minimal tax cost. The National Tax Service of Korea has challenged several such cases. The third pillar is simply time. Succession planning in Korean chaebol families begins decades before any patriarch is ill. Shares are transferred in small increments, trusts and foundations are established, and by the time an estate is formally assessed, much of the real value has already moved. The costs show up in several places. The most visible is governance. Because chaebol heirs inherit control regardless of their management record, Korea has accumulated a striking history of underqualified leaders at the helm of national champions. The Korea Corporate Governance Service has repeatedly flagged minority shareholder rights as critically weak inside chaebol structures. Then there are the scandals. Lee Jae-yong of Samsung was convicted in connection with bribery charges tied to the government's effort to smooth a controversial merger that benefited the Lee family succession, a case that prompted a special prosecutor and riveted the country for years, as reported by Reuters and the BBC. Lotte's founding family became embroiled in a criminal trial involving alleged embezzlement tied to succession disputes. Beyond headlines, economists at the Korea Development Institute have argued that the dominance of family-controlled conglomerates suppresses new firm entry and compresses economic dynamism for everyone else. Korea's chaebol succession story is not purely Korean. Wherever concentrated corporate empires meet family loyalty, the same toolkit tends to appear: circular ownership, undervalued asset transfers, and patient multi-decade planning. France's CAC 40, Japan's Keiretsu, and the dynastic holding companies of Southeast Asia all rhyme with what Korea has built. What makes Korea distinctive is the scale relative to a single national economy, and the speed. These empires were assembled in barely 2 generations. The OECD has noted repeatedly that countries with high statutory inheritance tax rates often see the most creative avoidance engineering, precisely because the incentive is so large. The honest conclusion is that a tax rate on paper and a tax rate in practice are two very different numbers, and understanding the gap between them tells you more about how power actually moves in a society than almost any other single measure.